Yes, well, thank you so much for staying with us. You are with Close Up, and we are talking about a very important topic. In fact, one that has been gripping the nation, and for many, many reasons, and not too nice reasons that would be. Guyana has now taken number one in the world, and this relates to suicide. I thought it best to deal with the issue from first up because we're going to be having quite a number of these discussions. But first up, with a group that has been working with the youths mostly, and they're made up of young people. So I wanted to get young people to talk about it. And so I've got a very young person here, a young leader, and Risa is here. She is Risa Khan. She is from Global Shapers Community, and the group got together not too long ago. I'm hearing just about 3 years, but they've done some work in 2015. And when last I spoke with them, they did say that there were quite a number of interesting things that they had planned through Raiza that would be. But let's before we go to her, let's tell you that this being the month of January for 2016 has been a month where Guyana has seen quite a number of not so nice cases as it relates to suicide. And as I said before, we are on we are being looked at as number one in the world, and it's something that we would really want to tackle and deal with. The president has held an emergency meeting, of course, bringing quite a number of players together, and the conversation has started. Uh, there is also the group, the Ghana Foundation. The first lady signed on to that. She's a patron. And one of the things that she spoke about in the launch, was the issue of mental health. And so I've got my young expert here with me. Welcome aboard, Reza.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Clemens.
mental health is an issue too that you are paying some attention to.
Yes, correct.
Before we go into that, though, let's talk about Global Shapers, what you
Sure.
guys have been doing.
No problem. So the Global Shapers, like you said, it's only 3 years young. We are an initiative of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum felt that leaders, that young people between the age of 20 and 30 in this era would be leaders in their own capacity eventually. And so they felt that what best way than to mold them. So we were created. 3 years later, there's over 4,000 shapers all over the world, 130 odd hubs in 100 odd countries. Our intention is to do community-based projects, and of course, there's capacity building for the members itself. For example, every year we have different themes. So this last year we had education, and you may have heard about our Head Start stationary
Yes.
drive in the interior. It's our basically our signature project at this point in time. It's been very successful every year. Different challenges every year, but different. The only common thing is we always have successful results from that project in particular. We also have had human rights as a theme. We are creating a website geared towards basically connecting with the at least social media public with regards to human rights, violations of human rights, and how do we move forward in terms of if you have a complaint or so forth. We also then have, of course, mental health now as a theme. It looks like it will be a theme to
For
stay.
quite a while, yeah.
This was my baby. This was a project I had put forth since my first year, second year as a shaper. I've also been with Shapers over 2 years. And it was proposed, and the second year, and when it was proposed the second year is when it was able to come to life. Last September, we had been working on it since about June, doing the research, doing the feasibility studies, visiting locations and so on, getting an idea of who and how to run this project, basically.
Okay. Let's zero into mental health.
Yes.
And quite a number of things you've been doing on that work as well. It is an area that has not really been treated. Of course, we've got Dr. Byro Hari, who has been working and talking a lot about the need to zero in on it. Hence, we've got challenges now,
Yep.
and we have to get on the ball. What did the group find?
Well, what has been happening is that I've spoken with psychiatrists here, Dr. Byro, Dr. McCrae, and one of her understudies, a young man by the name of Dom. And we have been speaking about the fact that mental health is happening in Ghana. It is. And we're in denial of this. whether it's because we just don't have the capacity financially or the capacity human resources wise to look more into the mental health. But if you speak to psychiatrists, they'll tell you we have cases of schizophrenia, we have cases of anxiety disorder here. I personally feel that in a country with limited resources of counselors and so forth, that of course you're going to have people walking around post-traumatic, syndrome disorder, people who are raped, or we have molestation or abuse. People are not seeking counseling because there's not enough counselors or qualified counselors or psychiatrists or psychologists. So of course, in my mind, the only logical thing is that there are persons walking around with mental health disorders and conditions that are going untreated. And how that affects the suicide rate is because we have people who have depression, major depression, long-term depression, people who have, anxiety disorders that, don't allow them to cope the way that someone who is in tune with, the kind of coping mechanisms that we may have, in the sense of if you have a bad day, you go home, you speak to someone, the stress is alleviated. But persons who are suffering from mental health disorders, or just the general public, my findings from the workshop, because I implemented in the module that I made, I had a section. It was a 2-day workshop, and the second day was geared towards suicide prevention and coping mechanisms, which I presented on, which that is my background. I have, for those who don't know, I have a background in psychology and social work, and my work experience has been geared towards suicide prevention, counseling, and youth development. So that's why I was able to effectively present on that. So what I found was this was a very interactive, that second day was very interactive. It wasn't just lecture style. So you got members of the population who came out to talk about, what are ways in which people cope with stress, the different levels, what is their recreational to do in Region 2, because this project was geared towards Esquivel Coast. And what you found was that people didn't really know how to cope. People used their families, if you had family. People used religious leaders. And of course, people were definitely engaged in use of alcohol and drugs. Another aspect of the module that was created was we looked at concurrent disorders, which is a combination of one's mental health disorder with substance abuse disorders. Now, substance abuse disorders is, the use, the abuse, and the dependency on a substance, alcohol, marijuana, etc. And in Guyana, we definitely have a substance abuse disorder issue. People are not taking in, and I think that's a cultural thing. I think, and later we'll talk about culture and how culture affects things like suicide, but we're not addressing alcoholism in Guyana, and it is a major contributor to the suicide rate, to related domestic issues, violence, molestation, etc. And so that was something we found, that people would just say, well, when I stress, I just see them boys just go and drink. So, and young people were saying this, that, they're like, we want to engage in recreational activities, cricket and so on the beaches and so on in Esquivel Coast, but they're like, it basically turns into a drinking session. You play cricket, you drink a beer. You play cricket, drink a beer. And so it's not a healthy environment. Yes, you're trying to get some recreational activity in and use that as a coping mechanism and a self-care mechanism, but then you have that unhealthy attachment and association to everything again, drinking and so forth. So it's a challenge. How do you separate the two, really?
According to the WHO, Raiza, we have got, and the indications are that men generally are the ones who seem to be more popularly the one taking their lives, and then you've got women, children down the order. In Guyana, this situation is kind of reversed as it relates to children, the young people. We're finding young people being those that are more often than not the ones taking their lives. Isn't this a very worrying indication? How do we treat with it? How do we deal with our young people? You being a youth, speaking with them, what's the feedback?
Yeah, definitely it's a concern. I think globally, the statistics stay relatively the same. It's not that men are committing more suicide, it's just that women attempt to commit suicide, but men complete more often than not. And you would see this for the past 3 weeks from Christmas Day. We have had about 15 odd attempts, reported attempts. Now, that's very saddening to me, of course, and most of the general population feels this way as well. You see it in social media, you hear it in discussions, but um, the concern is that those are reported suicides. Those are reported attempts, which means double of that all over the country. People are still attempting to commit suicide. It's just that certain methods are a little bit more effective than others. Funny enough, statistics says that women are a little bit more concerned with the cleanup. Something to do with women and the psyche. If they're going to commit suicide, they're going to do it very quietly. Pills or whatever the case may be. They're not going to like shoot themselves or something extreme like that, where you might see men doing that. In Guyana, we're seeing, most of the times we see poison being used and hanging as of lately. There were 4 women, for example, in study hospital last Sunday, and none of them succumbed, at least to our knowledge, because that's another problem as well. When we have cases that go in as suicide, they may not succumb that day, they may not succumb that week, but because of respiratory issues or damage to the liver, they will pass
over time.
in about a few weeks or so, and then they're not registered as a suicide death. They're registered as whatever the case may be.
Other complications.
Yes. So that also affects statistics in Guyana. So the problem now is that we're seeing a lot of youth, and I think that really comes back to coping mechanisms. I think we are not breeding our children to think critically. Think critically about the effects of committing suicide, the effects that it might have on the family, and themselves are not. And again, it's very difficult. It's very complicated. Mental health overall is complicated, and when you start bringing other factors, like in Guyana, we have poverty, we have employment, we have molestation, we have these domestic-related violence, so on. My whole notion is that family, and people think this is very harsh to say, but family is either the reason that you do not commit suicide, and family can also be the reason why you do commit suicide. And that is a very strong statement to say that we need to work on our home-based relationships. We need to work on being vulnerable, communicating, paying attention to our children. I also, I've also spoken to teachers, and I say, look, you spend most of the time with these children. They go home, parents don't have the time, they don't have the energy. When you're working X amount of hours to put food on the table, parents sometimes, this is not just Guyana, they're thinking of parenting in their mind is getting you to school, getting you a uniform, putting food on the table, make sure your homework is done. There's no time and energy to put into in placing values, spending quality time, getting a relationship, building rapport with your own children. So that is why children are, seeking. You see the stories. When I was doing my suicide presentation, I implored people to read the articles, but not just as what it says in the media. Now, ask yourself, why would a 14-year-old have a 21-year-old boyfriend? Or why would a 14-year-old run away from home? Why? Because the home is not, it's not an environment that is safe, possibly. So that's, when I read the newspapers, those are the questions I ask myself. And I ask, people, don't read these articles at face value, because there's other things going on. There's mental health, there's physical disabilities, there might be abuse going on, etc. So don't, and I think that's the thing in Guyana, we sometimes are quick to judge and say, oh, well, she bad, that's a bad girl, that's a bad child, she don't respect her family, she don't respect her body, she wild, she want big man. These are things that breed the culture of, if I go home pregnant, what will be the repercussions of that? And persons will, I think, because they're so scared of what the parents might do, kick them out, take them to have an abortion, whatever the case may be, that they just rather not deal with that.
Okay. So we need the families to be more enabling. We need it to be more comforting. We need them to speak to the children more. Only last week, it was a 12-year-old in Trinidad committed suicide because she failed an exam.
Yeah.
And so this is really horrible.
Yep.
It's Trinidad. We
is.
had one in Guyana, I think it was, a few years ago. This would have been the secondary school's entrance examination in Babis. And the young lady took her life. This is really going to the point that you're making, that families really need to speak more. They need to spend more time.
Mm-hmm.
The community back in the day, Reza, was
Mm-hmm.
one where it was enabling when an elder would stop and see a youngster, form a conversation with him or her,
Yeah.
and find out how they're doing. What are
Yeah.
you doing? What are you doing next to see you playing football? Where do you want to go with this?
Mm-hmm.
And how's school going and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Are we missing those pillars that we had way before now that's really causing this situation to escalate?
Yeah, I definitely believe so. I think that there was a project that the Ministry of Health had in 2009, and we're now hearing it being spoken about again, which I'm very happy because the long term vision for mental health yourself was that we would have the workshops, we'd identify persons within the workshops who would want to be further trained. We would give that list to the Ministry of Health. They would further train the people and implant them back into their communities. Now, the Gatekeepers program, which was implemented during Dr. Leslie's term as Minister of Health, was exactly that. You had community based members who would check in, do regular meetings, follow up, go and meet with families who might be in distress because honestly, the communities know. The
Mm-hmm.
community knows who is getting beat, who is using, abusing alcohol, who is not, who's spending their whole paycheck on the rum shop, those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. So the community is where, and the World Health Organization says, to move forward, any country, to move forward with mental health, um, development in Ghana, or suicide, you need to keep it community based. You need to keep it grassroots. And you need to decentralize these institutions. Now, Ghana doesn't have, we have one mental health institution, to my knowledge, in Berbice. And so, as much as people say the conditions are bad there, that's not the way forward. Upgrading psychiatric wards is in the best interest of the people who are using it on a regular basis. But to move forward long term, we need to